Hi folks, I'm Harshita Chaudhary, and today instead of a full chapter explanation, we are going to focus on a specific topic from your CBSE additional material, that is Arab Spring. But before we begin with the explanation part, I must tell you that this video is divided into two parts. The initial part is where I will explain exactly what is written in your CBSE additional material. But in the second part, I will add little extra information that will help you in tackling those extra surprise questions. Because even if the board says that questions are going to be framed from the additional material and NCERT only, sometimes the extra details are what decide whether you score 95% or not. So if you are ambitious and want to go that extra mile, the second part is specially for you. With that said, we will start with our initial part, the first part now. The 21st century or the 2000s were the period where the desire to establish democracy was seen in few West Asian or Arab countries, and this rising demand led to the occurrence of an event called Arab Spring. So, Arab Spring as an event started in Tunisia in 2009. Here, people were suffering due to existing corruption, unemployment, and poverty, which they attributed to be a result of autocratic government which was ruling Tunisia at that time. Therefore, the people decided to bring a democratic government because they believed that a government which is chosen by the citizens through democratic elections would care enough to solve the citizens' problem because already they could see how exploitative their autocratic leader were. But the problem of poverty, corruption, and unemployment weren't central to Tunisia as a country only. Many West Asian countries were facing the same conditions. And that's why Tunisia's example acted as an inspiration for other countries as well. For example, Hosni Mubarak, who was ruling Egypt since 1979, had to step down from his post due to massive democratic protests. Similar demands to establish democracy in their respective country also came from the citizens of Yemen, Bahrain, Libya, and Syria. This sums up what the CBSE material includes regarding Arab Spring. But if you want to dig deeper and ensure that you are well prepared to answer any unexpected question in boards, then stay with me a little longer as we will proceed to the second part. In this part too, we will start with Tunisia first in order to understand why that Arab Spring happened. What event led to the arisal of Arab Spring in other West Asian countries too? So here, a street vendor named Mohammed Bouzizi was so brutally harassed by the local authorities that he lit himself on fire, and his death spiked anger amongst Tunisian people, which later led them to protest against and overthrow their ruler Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. Now you don't have to worry about remembering his long complicated name because we can call him Ben Ali for simplicity as well. So Ben Ali fled the country in order to save himself as the people were really angry with him. After he did so, the Tunisian people could successfully establish democracy in their country. And you know what? Tunisia is the only West Asian country that got successful in doing so, as the desire to bring democracy somewhat failed or couldn't be brought in the same measure in other West Asian countries. And we will get to know why that happened as we proceed further. Coming on to Egypt. Here, as already mentioned, Hosni Mubarak was forced to step down after ruling Egypt for 32 years since 1979, as already mentioned. After he was overthrown, military took temporary control over the country, and while military was controlling the country, elections were conducted to choose the government and its leader. But democracy didn't remain stable here in the upcoming years, even though it could get established once. but then it didn't remain stable in the future years. Similarly, in Bahrain, protests started against King Hamad bin Isa al Khalifa, but these protests were suppressed as the king sought help from the King of Saudi Arabia instead. And the King of Saudi Arabia provided Hamad al Khalifa with military support because if the protest would have got successful in Bahrain, then the people of Saudi Arabia might have overthrown their king too. So, in order to save his position, Saudi Arabian king helped the Bahrainian king. So, this was a classic case of the idiom all thieves are cousins. Even though these protests were later suppressed, they still were able to force the king to bring some reforms, even when democracy couldn't be established properly. Okay, so even though democracy couldn't be established in its full form, some reforms could be brought in Bahrain. Additionally, both Yemen and Libya witnessed civil wars and ongoing political instability as large scale conflicts erupted between the supporters of the rulers in these countries and the supporters of democracy. For example, in Yemen, the supporters of Yemen's ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh and the supporters of democracy were not on the same consensus. They couldn't arrive on the same consensus. And that's why, from the pressure of the supporters of democracy, the king, the ruler, could step down, but democracy still couldn't be established in the country. While in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, you must have heard his name or seen his photo because he's a famous political figure, okay? His supporters argue that he was overthrown and killed during NATO's intervention in Libya because he didn't wanted to trade with US and other Western countries and wanted to bring a African pan-African currency which would replace the dominance of US dollar in oil trade. As you know, the African and West Asian countries are rich in oil. So this would prevent the exploitation of African and West Asian countries by the West. However, others who didn't like him, they said that actually he was very authoritarian and he massively suppressed the Arab Spring protests. And he wasn't killed by NATO or by US because NATO and US was actually trying to save the civilians' lives as a United Nations mission. And instead, Muammar Gaddafi was killed by the rebel forces. Rebel forces were those people who were against his authoritarian rule. Okay, whatever might have been the case, one thing is certain, and that is his death started a civil war in his country Libya between two opposing groups. Here, one section supported Gaddafi and saw him as a martyr who stood up against USA in order to protect his country's oil reserves, and other section opposed Gaddafi because of his authoritarian leadership. And this is why democracy couldn't be established in Libya as well, because people couldn't arrive on common consensus. When people are fighting, they cannot agree on same thing, then how can you bring democracy or any other political development in that particular region or country? And the most heartbreaking thing happened in Syria because here Bashar al Assad aggressively suppressed the protest, leading to prolonged civil war between his supporters and protesters again. But unlike in Bahrain, where at least some reforms were made, nothing could change in Syria. With this, we come to the end of today's video. I hope I was able to assist you in understanding this small but an important topic which shaped the politics in Arabian countries. Also, any suggestions or feedbacks from your side in the comment sections would be greatly appreciated. Thank you and have a nice day.